Onto the repeater then. The repeater is also a very useful tool in our arsenal, if you ask me. What this is going to do is it's going to show us a couple of things. So we have the basics in here. A lot of you guys are going to know how to use the repeater. I'm not going to go too deep into it. You have your request, you have your response. One cool thing that I wanted to show you guys is that you can render your response. A lot of you will probably already know this, but you can also toggle between your history. Like if I send a few requests, I might make a few changes. There we go. I can go back and forth between my requests, and I also have a little bit of a history. I can right click my request, and here are some more interesting options. I can save that entire history as a file, and I can base at 64 encode the responses and the replies. But I can also copy that specific URL. I can copy it as a curl command. That can be useful if you're writing your report. You're always going to ask what endpoint is this vulnerability on. Then you can just copy your URL from here. You might want to copy the request as a curl command. I usually don't do that. I provide steps to reproduce in the application itself. And you might want to copy it to a file, this specific request, for later usage. There are some other useful things you can do in here. This at the moment is a post request. I can change the request method to make it a get request. Can change it back, but of course my parameters are going to be lost in here. I can right click it and I can change the body encoding. This is going to make it a put request, or it should make it a put request, but it doesn't in this case. Then we also have the paste from file. Then we can load a file that we saved previously. Now if you do that, you do have to be mindful, because there might be some authorization headers which might have expired. You might have to do the authorization call again and replace those authorization headers in requests that are a little bit older. If they have expired, then they have expired, and you need to do that, of course. And you might say, for example, explore a different endpoint. For example, if I don't want to use REST login, but I want to use login 2. Now I've been playing a little bit with this, but this is not in my sitemap. I can right click it and I can add this thing to my sitemap real easily. So there we go, I have a target. Now I should have this under REST users, and there it should be, but it's not there. That's not good, but I'll check into that later. On to the next part, because that's about it for the repeater. This is all very basic stuff. You guys probably know all of this. You can also rename your tabs again, as you can see in here, by just double clicking on that number, and then you can start renaming your tab. You can also reopen closed tabs. That's also a possibility. And you can have WebSocket things in here as well. As you see, you can send things from your WebSocket history, or you can click on this WebSocket thingy here, and then you can open a specific WebSocket request. You can reconnect, and then you can do whatever you want from here. Like for example, I'm connecting right now. There we go. Oh, non-WebSocket response returned. That means that my connection is not open, but this is useful if you want to play with WebSockets a little bit. There's also a useful inspector in here. I can select these values and it's going to do things for me. Like for example, if I select this JWT token, it's going to say this is the selected text, this is decoded from the URL encoding, and I can do things with this. Not particularly with the JWT token apparently, but I might be able to do something with this. Like for example, I might be able to HTML and decode it from HTML encoding, URL encoding, base64. I can see the query parameters in here. I can add specific ones. It's something that they added in later versions. Really useful, really cool. I would advise you guys again to play around with it a little bit. We can also go to the WebSocket history, of course, and send specifically to the repeater. From there, we have to reconnect to our WebSocket, but it's going to say it's not open. That's because my website is not online, by the way. That's why it's returning this response. But if it would be open, I would be able to resend my socket message. So WebSocket's really, really cool. As you can see, you don't see the difference between a WebSocket tab and a normal tab. So what I would do is I would rename it, and I would rename it with WS in front of it, and that way you always know that it's a WebSocket tab. Very, very useful, because if you have 50 tabs open, you really want to know which does which, of course.